Pivot tables are so useful and will help you get so much quicker in your work and in your findings. They can be a little intimidating at first. When you're first looking at them, they can sort of seem strange and different. But what you'll need to know before you start is all of the data that you want to use. So let's say you want to select this whole file. You want all the data in this file. For a pivot table, you'll have to make sure that it's set up a couple ways, or else you'll get some errors right off the bat. So you need to make sure that every column that has data has a header and isn't blank. So in this data file, if I scroll across, you can see there's a title and there are items in just about every single column. And that's perfect. That's the way we want it. I'm going to insert a column just to show you what it would look like if there was an error. So if for some reason you had a completely blank column, like I've just created here, and you selected your whole data file, and you wanted to create a pivot table, you would go to Insert on the ribbon, and you would go to Tables and Pivot Table. And you'd say, I want all of the data. Now you could either select it all, or you could do like I did. I clicked this little triangle in the top, which is a way to select all the data. And you can go ahead and press OK. Now I got this error because one of my columns had no data in it. This is one of the more common errors that you'll get. So if you see this pop up, don't give up. Go back to your data file and see where you might have a blank or an empty column. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that empty column because there's no data in it. We can't use it in the table. And I'm going to do it again. So I'm going to select all the data by clicking this triangle. And you want to only do that if you know that your data file is set up with just individual data points. So you might not want to do this if, for example, you had a row at the very end that had maybe totals or subtotals. So let's just say that you had some kind of total here that was something like the sum of all of the individuals who are in this file. And this is pretty common, especially if you're getting a file that's used from something else. You might have a last row at the end. And what you don't want to have is that data that's sort of at a different scale or type showing up in your pivot table. So if that's the case and you have a row like this that say we don't want in there, I'm just going to color it yellow so you can see that's the one we don't want. You can also select a whole data range, and you do that by picking one cell, holding it down, and just scrolling all the way. Now on a big data file like this, I typically wouldn't do that because this just takes a while. It might be fun to look at. But you could go up and select all of the data that way. So either way will work. Okay, so for our pivot table, we want to select all of the data. Now again, I know that all of my columns are filled in, and I know there aren't any extra rows at the end that I don't want to use. I'm going to go to Insert, Tables, Pivot Table. And because I clicked that little arrow there, it already knows that it wants all the data from column A all the way to column AI, which is what the letters get to at the end. And it's going to put it into a new worksheet for me. Now it just auto opens up this blank thing. This can be a little intimidating if you haven't worked with it before. But what this is a blank starting place where you can pull in the data that you care about and that you want to know more about. So let's say that I did want to compare the average ages of people in different departments. So I can see in my data set that there's an item for age here, and I can see the departments are here. And you can either drag information into the pivot table section over on the left or into these boxes down here on the bottom right. Now, Usually, if you're wanting to create a table with different set of information, you want to use the rows and or columns. I'm going to start with rows. So what happened is I took the department and I put it into rows. And now I can see that there are 3 departments: human resources, research and development, sales. And this is its way of saying, hey, there's some blanks in there. Now that might mean blank data, but that also could just mean extra rows at the bottom of your file. Now what I care about is what is the average age of people in each one of these departments. So age, you would actually want as your value because that's the thing you want to analyze. So I'm going to take age and I'm going to drop it into this values section. Now you can see by the title here and in the bottom right that it automatically did a sum. That means that it added up all those ages together. And this doesn't make a lot of sense. This is saying that the research and development department is 35,598 years old. That's not accurate. That's not what we're going for. That is the combined age of everyone who works in that department. But we would like to see the average age of people in those departments. So what you can do is you can either right-click on the values as they are in the table, or go to where you have your variable, your item, and you can do this little drop-down arrow. And I'm gonna shrink it up here for a moment just so that you can see a little better. And when you do that drop-down arrow, you'll be able to get this thing called value field settings. It's basically the settings on that value. So if we press that, we'll get this nice little dialog box saying, all right, we're doing the sum, or the addition of all of them together. Would you like to pick something different? In our case, we'd say, yeah, we want to know the average age. So we press OK on age, and all of a sudden the numbers change. And they change to these values of average age that we saw before. So there's that 36.9 for the average age of everyone in the file. And there's that 37.8 for the average age of everyone in HR. And now you can compare the 3 organizations to each other. And they're all fairly close in terms of the numbers, but slight differences. And you'll see that blank one has no information here because that was probably just an extra row. If you wanted to clean it up, or let's just say we only cared about HR and research and development, you can press the arrow on your row labels and uncheck anything you don't want to see. So there, now we have just HR, just research and development, and the grand total changed because we took out the salespeople. So this number is just the grand total average age of HR and research development because the other one isn't selected anymore. So this is good. Now we can see, is there a difference between the 2 departments? Not much. They're pretty close. But we can ask questions like, well, are there maybe a lot more employees in the research and development or R&D department? How many people is this based off of? What's the min? What's the max? Things like that. Now what you can actually do in a pivot table, and this is where it starts to be really helpful, is you can bring that same age field in again. So we already have age in there once, set as average. I can actually click and drag age as another value. You're going to see it just dropped it in there as a sum again. It likes to default to that sometimes. And this time, maybe what I want to know, and again, I can right click it and go to value field settings, or I can go over to the table and go to value field settings. I know it's dropped out of the view for the moment, but I can click on it there. And now I have these other options. So maybe I want to see what the minimum age is. And there we go. I can see that the minimum age, the lowest age number in the HR department is 19. The lowest number in research and development is 18. And I can keep doing this for any different variables that I care about. So maybe I can do also the max. And now I've got the ability to see those side by side. Another thing that you might want to know is just how many. employees are we talking about here? How many people do we have information on? You could pull age again in, and this time you could choose to use the value field settings of count. That will count how many data points do you have in here. So I can see that the average age of HR employees in this file is 37.8 with a minimum of 19, a maximum of 59, and that this was based off of 63 data points because that was the count of how many people I had age numbers on. And that's compared to the research and development ones that I had 961 data points on. And this gives us a much fuller picture to understand our data off of. And it is a very helpful way to compare different groups and areas with some basic descriptive statistics around what we're finding and where it's at. Some additional things that you can do is you can change how these are calculated. So not only can you do things like average, min, max, or counts, you can also do what is called summarize values by, and that will let you change it to what we saw, or show values as. So let's say that instead of just seeing 63 HR employees versus the larger number of research and development employees, maybe I wanted to know what percentage of employees the different groups are. Right now it's a no calculation, but I could tell it that give me the percent of this column total. So of all employees that I have the counts of their age for in this column, what percent are in HR and what percent are in R&D? And so now I can see that they add up to 100%, and then it's a little over 6% for HR and almost 94% for R&D. And so you can use these different show values as to give you other views and help you with things like finding rates or proportions or percentages as you're working with your pivot table. So the more you learn and use pivot tables, the faster you will get. And what they will let you do is to get all sorts of analysis together fast, but also to help you really compare and look across different data sets. So hopefully that helped you with pivot tables. Once you get that down, you can move on to some more fun things like pivot charts and other areas, but it's a good starting point here.